So Alex, thank you for coming to the Potomac Riverkeeper offices to speak with our members about your book, The Ripple Effect. We appreciate you taking the time to answer a few questions for our members who couldn't make it tonight. One of my first questions would be, what most surprised you when you began researching this topic?
Well, the first thing that surprised me was just how vast and complex water is. We tend to take water for granted because it's this clear, almost tasteless, seemingly simple resource. But it's an essential resource, one that we require for life. And it turns out it's also an emotional resource. People tend to get very uptight when you start telling them how to use their water, or not use their water, as the case may be. And I think that was the component that really struck me, that the minute you start telling people how to use their water, it's like telling them how to lead their lives. And we humans don't generally like that. But I think that with education we tend to realize that we all depend on water like the air we breathe, and that if we look out for its sustainable use and cleanliness, that we all benefit in the end.
Great. Now you went out on a Shenandoah with Riverkeeper Jeff Kelby, and you write about Washington, D.C. and the Potomac and the Chesapeake in your book. And you've worked with some of our friends such as Vicki Blazer and Bob Hirsch over at U.S. Geological Survey, who know these watersheds quite intimately. What perspective or insight did our watersheds and your time with Jeff and Vicki and Bob add, or how did it inform your book?
Well, the Chesapeake Bay watershed is a huge area, and the Chesapeake Bay itself is one of the richest ecosystems in the world. It's sort of a perfect breeding ground for fish and aquatic life, and yet that tremendous resource has been on the decline rapidly lately. Largely, we believe, from human pollution. The areas around the bay are intensely farmed. There are a lot of big poultry operations that end up polluting local waterways. And one of the things that I did with Bob Hirsch and Jeff Kelby was to follow the water from little tiny creeks way inland, all the way down through rivers and streams into the Potomac and then out into the bay. And it was a very informative experience, and really seeing how the toxic burden of the water builds up as it goes downstream, and then enters the bay with the impact of an aquatic bomb. It was stunning to me. What happens is, once the pollutants reach the bay, they often create a huge algae bloom, which kills off life in the bay and creates the notorious dead zones. And the dead zones are just lifeless areas in the bay, and it's really stunning to see them up close and personal. The bay is known for its oysters, its crabs, its rockfish. These are famous products of the region, and unfortunately they're all on the decline. And so there are scientists like Vicki Blazer who are studying the fish, and like Bob Hirsch who are trying to revive the bay, and then there are the Riverkeepers who are looking out for the watershed, and they play a crucial role.
Your book has certainly struck a chord with mainstream culture, as proven by your appearing on The Daily Show and other places I know. So after making such a well-researched case, and have you found it difficult not to overwhelm people with this issue? What most resonates, and who do you find is taking interest?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We are, as humans, 70% water. And so water tends to be a very personal issue, whether we realize it or not. And so obviously the health of our water systems has a great impact on our own health. And so when you explain that to people, it tends to resonate with a broad audience. In fact, Jon Stewart himself was joking about how he didn't even want to know what all the things that are in his body as a result of drinking water. But you know, there are four main issues I discuss in the book. The first is water quality. What's in our water? What are we drinking? And what's it doing to us? The second is the prospect of drought. What happens with climate change? Are there going to be areas of this country and around the world where we have too little water to support the population? And what can we do about that? The third is flood, the reverse of that. We just saw this past summer with Hurricane Irene and the flooding in the Midwest. That floods can be extremely destructive, and I'm concerned that people don't pay enough attention to flood. Again, climate change will create more storms, more intense storms, and flooding is going to be a real issue for this century, but we're really ill prepared for that. And the fourth issue is, how do we use water going forward? What are the sustainable practices that we can implement? What are some of the new things that we're doing? And what are some of the dangers? What are the new chemicals that we're putting in the waters? Where are places that we are using too much water or that we are unprepared for flooding? And so, those are rather broad, broad themes, and the hard thing for me as a writer was to boil all that down, as it were, and try to decide what not to use and what to include, and to make that a compelling story for people to read, so that it would entertain and educate them and get them motivated. You asked about how it's impacted my life. I've changed my water use practices many ways. I've done the usual things like I take shorter showers. I drink much less bottled water than I used to, although I'm not anti-bottled water per se. I sometimes found myself getting so intense about water that I became a little preachy, actually. And I have a funny story, which is one day I was in my gym and I noticed a guy brushing his teeth really slowly while the water was gushing at full blast. And I didn't know what to say. And he saw me looking at him in the mirror. And finally I couldn't take it any longer. And I went and I asked him, very politely, "Sir, would you mind turning off the water?" And with that, he spun around and jabbed his toothbrush right at my eye and started cursing at me. And that's when I realized the emotional impact of water, and that when you start telling people how to use water, it pushes a red button inside of us. I vowed to keep my mouth shut after that. The kicker to the story is recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was in the gym, same guy, doing the same thing. I saw it happen. I looked at him in the mirror, he looked at me, and this time he turned off the spigot. So there's a happy ending to the story. Maybe it's a good thing to speak up.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming by here, and well, obviously for the work, this huge piece of work that you're contributing to the cause of protecting our rivers.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you, and support the Riverkeepers.